I was a junior officer on base, with no family remaining. Alone in this world, a 4-star Admiral came for a briefing. I noticed his ring. It was just like my late father's. I confronted him, and he turned pale. "Who was your father?" he asked. I spoke the name, and the Admiral started crying. What he shared with me next changed everything. You know, sometimes, one tiny flicker of recognition can shatter everything you thought was true. One glimpse of something familiar, and suddenly, the past rips open, bleeding out secrets you never imagined. I'm talking about the day I looked a 4-star Admiral in the eye and realized my father's accident was anything but. For 2 years, I lived in a kind of numb silence. My father, Master Chief Aaron Hale, gone. Car went off the highway. An accident. That's what they told me. And as a Navy SEAL, as an officer, I'd learned to compartmentalize, to just be. But grief doesn't care about rank or training. It crawls into the cracks, settling in the quiet hours between duty and sleep, making holidays feel hollow. I was a 30-year-old woman carrying a lifetime of service and far too many ghosts. Then the Admiral arrived. You could feel it on base, that particular stiffness when top brass is coming. Marines stood a little straighter, security swept every hall twice. I was just trying to get through my post-deployment paperwork, but the buzz was everywhere. He's here. Just landed. South Entrance. A 4-star rarely visits a mid-sized stateside installation like ours, so whatever he was here for, it wasn't routine. I wasn't even supposed to be in the same hallway as him, but fate, or maybe something far bigger, placed me there at the exact moment he walked in. And then I saw it. It wasn't his uniform, or his ribbons, or even that aura of command that always surrounds men like him. It was his left hand, specifically, the ring on it. A thick, heavy navy ring, with a custom-carved trident, polished edges, and a deep blue center stone. My father's ring. His exact ring. My father had designed it with a jeweler friend during his final years in the service. It was one of a kind. He wore it every single day. And when he died, they told me it was never recovered from the wreck. Seeing it now nearly knocked the wind from my lungs. I just stared, not breathing, my heart slamming against my ribs. This wasn't some mass-produced piece of jewelry. Anyone wearing this ring had to be deeply, intimately connected to my father. I tried to swallow the shock, but then the Admiral looked up. Our eyes met. Maybe he saw the confusion, the recognition, the absolute disbelief on my face. Maybe he recognized something of my father in me. Because for a split second, his expression changed. Not the polite, unreadable wear of a flag officer. Something raw. And in that moment, I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care that I was a lieutenant commander and he was a 4-star. I needed to know. So, when the briefing broke, and he stepped into the hallway with his aides, I walked straight toward him. "Admiral," I said, my voice steady despite my hands being ice cold. "May I ask about your ring?" He paused mid-stride. His aides kept walking, assuming he'd follow, but he didn't. He turned slowly toward me, studying my face as if trying to place a distant memory. He lifted his hand. "This?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," I said. "That ring is familiar." He looked at me for an eternity. Then something in him shifted. His shoulders tightened, his jaw clenched, his pupils narrowed like a man bracing for impact. "Who was your father?" he asked softly. The hallway seemed to stretch for miles. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "Master Chief Aaron Hale." For 2 seconds, nothing. Then his face just cracked. Not just surprise, but a mixture of grief, shock, and something dangerously close to guilt. He stepped back, gripping the ring as if afraid it would burn him. "No," he whispered. "Not you, dear God. You're his daughter." The world tilted. He removed his hat with shaking hands, something 4-star admirals do not do in hallways. His voice broke. It was the sound of a man carrying a weight he had never intended to reveal. "Lieutenant Commander, we can't talk here. We need privacy. Now." That was when I knew. He wasn't just surprised to see my father's daughter. He was terrified. Terrified of what? Of me. Of the past. Of the truth? I didn't know. Not yet. But the ring, the look in his eyes, the way his voice cracked. I knew. My father's death wasn't an accident. And nothing in my life was ever going to be the same again. When a 4-star admiral tells you to follow him in private, you don't hesitate. At least, not on the outside. But inside, my pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. We walked down a quiet administrative corridor, past framed photos of sailors and Marines, faces of men and women who'd lived entire careers without ever brushing up against the kind of secrets I sensed were coming. The Admiral opened a small conference room at the end of the hall, shut the door and drew the blinds. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood with his hand resting on the back of a chair, staring at me the way someone stares at an old photograph they're not ready to pick up. "You look like him," he said finally, his voice low. "Not exactly, but the eyes, the posture, the way you walked toward me. I thought I was seeing a ghost." I didn't know how to respond. My father had been gone for 2 years, and people rarely mentioned him anymore. The topic hurt too much, but hearing it from someone of his stature, someone who clearly knew him deeply, sent a strange warmth and ache through my chest. "Admiral," I said carefully, "that ring, my father had one just like it. Identical. Custom made. They said it wasn't found in the wreck." He lowered himself slowly into the chair, like the weight of memories was heavier than his uniform. "Sit, Lieutenant Commander," he murmured. I sat across from him, my hands clasped so tight my knuckles turned white. He rubbed his brow. "Your father didn't just have a ring like this. This is his ring." My breath caught. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "Sir, what do you mean, his?" He removed the ring from his finger and placed it gently on the table between us. It looked even more familiar up close. The engraving, the deep blue stone, the slight scratch on the inner band from where my father had once caught it on a locker handle. "It belongs to Master Chief Aaron Hale," he said quietly. "It always has." I swallowed hard, the memory of my father's warm, calloused hand flashing across my mind. For a moment I couldn't speak. Finally I managed. How did you get it?" The Admiral leaned back, staring at the ring like it was radioactive. "Your father and I served together, long before you were born. We went through hell in a place most Americans will never know about. Not combat, not in the traditional sense, but something covert, something messy, political and dangerous." He paused, his eyes losing focus as if reliving the moment. "He saved my life. When we made it out," he continued, "we designed 2 matching rings. Brotherhood rings, we called them. Mine was kept pristine. Your father's, he wore every day until the accident." My throat tightened. Hearing another man speak about my father like that was almost too much. "But that doesn't explain," I said softly, "why it wasn't recovered in the crash, or how it ended up with you." His jaw clenched. "Because I pulled it off his hand myself." I froze. The air felt thin. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. "You were there," I whispered. He nodded. "Not when it happened, but shortly after. I was notified far earlier than you were. Everything in me told me something was wrong, so I rushed to the scene before the official teams arrived. They hadn't cordoned it off yet. The car was mangled. And your father, he swallowed hard. He didn't deserve the way he died." My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to grab his collar and demand the whole truth at once. But I held myself still. "Sir, why take the ring?" I managed. He rubbed his temples, exhaling shakily. "Because I intended to give it to you. But when I saw the condition of the investigation, the sloppiness, the quick dismissal, the push to label it an accident, I realized something wasn't right. And I feared if the ring was found, it might disappear into evidence and never make its way back to you. So I took it. It was wrong. But I thought I was protecting his legacy." I pressed a hand against my sternum, steadying my breath. It felt like someone had ripped open a sealed wound I had spent 2 years pretending didn't exist. "Sir, that accident was investigated. NCIS closed the case." He looked up sharply. "Closed it because someone wanted it closed." My heartbeat kicked into another gear. Someone wanted it closed. Someone didn't want questions asked. Someone didn't want the truth. "But why?" I whispered. He hesitated. A long, painful hesitation that told me he was fighting something inside himself. Guilt, fear, loyalty, I couldn't tell. "You deserve the truth," he said finally. "But it won't be easy to hear. Your father, he was involved in something just before he died. Something that put him in conflict with people who had power. Real power. He didn't tell you because he wanted to protect your career. I felt my breath catch. Protect what do I have to do with any of this? The Admiral looked straight into my eyes, and the sorrow there made my skin prickle. More than you know. My pulse hammered in my ears. The room felt too small, too bright, too quiet. What are you saying? I demanded. He lifted the ring again, holding it between us like a symbol of everything he had kept buried. Lieutenant Commander, your father didn't die because of an accident. He died because he refused to let someone ruin your future. A chill swept through me, from the base of my spine to the top of my scalp. My father died protecting me. The Admiral slid the ring toward me with trembling fingers. There's more. A lot more. And I'm going to tell you, but you need to prepare yourself. Your father was a man of honor, and he paid the price for it. I stared at the ring, my father's ring, and for the first time since his death, I felt something shift inside me. A mixture of rage, grief, and purpose. Tell me everything, I said. And the Admiral closed his eyes, bracing himself for the confession that would change the course of my life. He didn't start talking right away. For a moment, he just sat there, elbows on the table, hands folded over his mouth as if trying to hold the words in. I'd seen battle-hardened operators freeze before jumping out of a plane or breaching a door. This was the same look, only now it was about memory, not bullets. You know your father's record, he said finally. You've read the citations. Silver Star, Bronze Star commendations. He gave a short, humorless breath. But you don't know the story behind them. Not all of it. My father didn't talk about himself, I said. That sounds like him, the Admiral muttered. He always thought bragging was a waste of air. We were young then, he said. Different Navy. We ended up on a mission together that was the kind they don't put in history books. Your father wasn't even supposed to be there. He volunteered, and the op went sideways. He paused. I was the one who froze up, not him. I stared at him. A 4-star admitting that to a junior officer was something I never expected to hear. There was a hostage situation in a foreign port, he went on. Narrow streets, bad intel, bad weather. I made a bad call, walked us into a kill box. Your father dragged me out of it. I'd taken shrapnel, couldn't move my leg. He got me to cover, patched me up, then went back in to finish the job. His fingers tapped the table. He took down 3 men, secured the hostages, and got everyone home. I got the public credit. He got the scar tissue. After that, we weren't just colleagues. We were family. We had those rings made afterward, the Admiral said, tapping the band between us. We told ourselves if either of us ever forgot who we really were, what mattered, that ring would remind us. He looked at me again. Your father never forgot, even when it cost him. I swallowed. Cost him what, sir? His gaze hardened. His life. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, the Admiral said. 2 years ago, your father started poking around a series of contracts tied to this base and a few others. Maintenance gear. Training programs. On paper, everything looked fine. Too fine. Numbers a little too round. Results a little too perfect. He had an eye for that. Yes, he did, I said. My father could sense dishonesty in a heartbeat. He started asking questions. The Admiral went on quietly. At first, he spoke to a few supply chiefs, a few warrant officers. Some brushed him off. Others, well, let's just say they seemed nervous. One of the contractors providing gear to multiple commands had friends in high places. Friends more interested in keeping the money flowing than in checking if the product was worth a dime. He said the word dime, like it tasted bad. Your father caught a pattern. Equipment logged as new that looked like refurbished junk. Parts certified as tested that failed in real-world use. Small things at first, easy to ignore. But he wouldn't ignore them. He realized if we deployed with some of that gear, people could die. That sounds like him, I whispered. The Admiral gave a faint smile. He reacted exactly how I expected. He started writing things down. Dates, serial numbers, names. He reached out to an inspector he trusted. An honest man. And that's when the trouble started. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What kind of trouble? The contractor got wind of it, he said. Maybe through a leak. Maybe through someone who owed them a favor. Suddenly, your father got called in for informal chats. People suggested he was overworked, that maybe he should consider retirement, that maybe his daughter's career would be smoother if he didn't stir up waves. My jaw clenched. They threatened my career. In a roundabout way, the Admiral said. I wasn't in the room, but I saw the notes he made. They wanted him to back off, and they used you as leverage. It felt like someone shoved a knife between my ribs. He came to see me, the Admiral said softly. Brought a folder. Told me what he suspected. Told me they'd hinted that his ambitious daughter had a bright future as long as he stopped digging. He shook his head. I told him I'd look into it, that I'd handle it. He laughed, once a bitter sound. But the higher you go in this job, the more noise there is. Meetings, travel, politics. I took the folder, and somewhere between one airport and another I delayed. Convinced myself it couldn't be that bad. Anger rose in my chest. So you did nothing. I did not do enough, he admitted. By the time I realized he was right, it was too late. The clock ticked. 2 days before your father died. The Admiral said he requested a formal meeting with a civilian liaison for that contractor. They met off base. We know that much. What happened in that meeting, we don't have on record. But afterward, he called the inspector and said he was ready to file an official report. He sounded determined, calm, like a man who had decided where he stood. And then I asked. The Admiral's eyes met mine. Guilt swam there, old and heavy. And then less than 24 hours later, his car went off the road on a clear night, on a straight stretch of highway he'd driven 100 times. No skid marks. No other vehicles officially involved. Fast investigation. Quick conclusion. My stomach nodded. Accident. Accident, he echoed. Stamped. Filed. Closed. Except for one thing. When I saw the scene, it didn't look like an accident to me. My blood turned to ice. What are you saying, sir? He looked down at the ring, then back at me. I'm saying, he replied quietly, that your father didn't just stumble into a ditch. I believe someone helped that car leave the road. And I believe certain people made very sure the investigation never dug deep enough to prove it. The word formed on my tongue before I could stop it. Covered up, I whispered. He didn't disagree. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The blinds were half closed, the fluorescent lights humming their cold, even rhythm. Outside the conference room, life on base moved forward, boots on concrete, clipped orders, office chatter. But in that small room, time felt suspended, like the world had narrowed to 2 people in a single terrible truth. My father, I said, finally steadying my voice, was killed because he refused to let corruption slide. And you knew there was something wrong. The Admiral didn't deny it. He looked older than he had minutes before, like the weight of 2 years had suddenly caught up to him. Your father was one of the most honorable men I ever served with, he said quietly. But honor doesn't mesh well with certain people, especially people who profit from silence. A bitter taste filled my mouth. So who were they? Contractors? Civilians? Someone in uniform? His eyes flicked to the door, like he was measuring every word. I don't know the full list, but I know the contractor was the epicenter. A company that supplies everything from basic gear to specialized equipment. Unofficially, they're known for cutting corners. Officially, they're untouchable. I frowned. Untouchable? No contractor is untouchable. He huffed a tired breath. Most aren't. But this one has political insulation. Friends and DC donors with deep pockets. Admirals who owe them favors. That makes them very difficult to investigate. I leaned forward. And you think they're behind my father's death? I think they had motive, he said. I think they had opportunity. And I think your father rattled them enough to make him a problem. A burn of anger rose in my throat. Then why wasn't there an investigation? Why didn't you? I stopped myself, but the words still hung between us. Why didn't you do more? His gaze dropped to his hands. He clenched them, unclenched them, like someone trying to warm them fingers. When I arrived at the crash site, the local sheriff's department was already there. They weren't thrilled to see a flag officer, and they made it clear they had no intention of questioning their assessment. That's unusual, I muttered. It was more than unusual, he said. It was rehearsed. They kept repeating single vehicle accident. No signs of foul play before anyone even checked the car. Before anyone examined the undercarriage. Before anyone questioned why a man who never drank, never sped, and never drove without a seatbelt, just lost control on a dry, empty road. My jaw tightened. They were planting the narrative. He nodded grimly. Exactly. And NCIS. The case was referred to them, but the paperwork was a mess. Missing attachments, incomplete photos. I reached out quietly, but by then the report was already filed. He paused. Everything about that investigation looked rushed, as if someone wanted it to disappear before a real investigator could lay eyes on it. My chest felt tight, hot. And you still waited 2 years to tell me. I was wrong, he said immediately. He didn't defend himself, didn't hide behind rank. I thought maybe I was seeing ghosts. Maybe I was projecting guilt from that old mission onto something that was simply a tragedy. His voice cracked slightly. But the ring, the moment you saw it, the way you reacted. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stared at the ring. My father's ring. The one thing that should have been returned to me. The one thing that shouldn't have been missing from the wreck. Suddenly, everything snapped into sharper focus. Someone removed the ring, I whispered. Someone wanted it gone, he replied. And someone wanted the truth buried. For a long moment, my grief, quiet, cold, familiar, morphed into something new, anger. Real, searing anger. The kind that made the air feel sharp in my lungs. The kind that made my hands shake with purpose rather than pain. So what now? I asked. We just sit on this. The Admiral's eyes hardened with something like resolve. No, we're not sitting on anything. But we have to be smart. This isn't a fight you win by throwing punches. This is a fight you win by pulling the right threads. I'm listening, I said. He gestured toward a binder he'd brought with him, one I hadn't even noticed until now. Thick, heavy, worn from use. Your father kept copies, he said. Everything he gathered. He was meticulous, detailed, precise. He expected resistance. He knew people might try to twist his words or bury his findings, so he backed them up. A warmth of pride and sorrow filled my chest. That was who he was. He never walked into a battle unprepared. The Admiral opened the binder, revealing pages of notes in my father's handwriting. Serial numbers, purchase orders, photographs of damaged gear, names, dates, conversations recorded in shorthand. My breath caught. His handwriting, his meticulous, blocky letters. It felt like he was in the room with us. He left this with me 2 years ago, the Admiral said. Told me if anything happened to him, I needed to find you. I blinked hard. He planned for this, I whispered. He knew he was in danger. He suspected. The Admiral corrected gently. Your father believed in the system. He believed if he presented the problem clearly, someone would listen. And no one did. The Admiral closed the binder slowly. I didn't. Not soon enough. Silence settled again. Thick, suffocating, full of the unspoken truth between us. You want the truth, he said. You want justice. I can help you, but this won't be simple, and it won't be clean. I grew up with a Master Chief, I said quietly. Nothing about life is simple or clean. He gave the smallest nod. Then we start with this. He slid the binder toward me. Your father's notes, his timeline, his evidence. You need to study it, understand it. And then we go to the Inspector General. I felt something shift inside me then. A steady, grounding force. The grief that had weighed on me for years was still there, yes. But now it pulsed with direction, with purpose. For the first time since his death, I had something resembling solid ground beneath my feet. I touched the binder. My voice was steady. If he died protecting the truth, then I'll finish what he started. The Admiral's jaw tightened with solemn approval. Then brace yourself, Lieutenant Commander, because once we start this, there's no turning back. I don't know how long I sat there with the binder in front of me. Minutes, an hour. Time felt like it was dripping rather than moving, each second sinking deeper into the space between grief and purpose. The Admiral waited in silence, hands folded, eyes lowered, giving me room to breathe, or maybe giving himself the same. Finally, I opened the binder. The first page wasn't notes or reports. It was a picture, a photo I'd never seen. My father, younger, standing beside the Admiral on some dusty foreign road. Both of them sunburned, bruised, and grinning with exhaustion. Arms slung around each other's shoulders. Camouflage faded from wear. Gasoline stains on their sleeves. That kind of grin only existed between people who survive something together. My throat tightened. The Admiral watched me quietly. He kept that photo, he said. Always. I flipped the page. Beneath the photo were my father's unmistakable handwriting, the letters sharp and deliberate. For my daughter, if she ever needs the truth. A shiver passed through me. He'd known. Not what would happen, but that something might. And he prepared for it. I turned to the next section. Rows of serial numbers paired with notes about training accidents, malfunctions, near-fatal failures. He documented each incident, the dates, the exact equipment used, the connection to the same contractor. This is enough to raise questions, I said quietly. Enough for an inquiry, but not enough to prove murder. The Admiral nodded. No, but it's enough to show motive, and motive mattered. I kept flipping through pages. Photos of cracked gear, shattered components that shouldn't have shattered. Communication devices that had been tested and documented as fully operational despite obvious defects. Eventually, halfway through the binder, I reached a single sheet of paper, thicker, older, folded once. I unfolded it carefully. It was a letter in my father's handwriting. The date at the top was the day before he died. I glanced at the Admiral. Did you read this? He nodded once, regret shadowing his expression. I wasn't sure if I had the right, but I suspected it might help you someday. I took a breath and began reading. Asterisk, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope so. But just in case, there's something I need you to know. They threatened you. Asterisk, my hands trembled. I forced myself to keep reading. Asterisk, not directly. They're too smart for that. But they made it clear your future depended on my silence. They want the contracts. They want the money. They want men in uniform to keep quiet and fall in line. I would rather die than let them touch your career. So, I'm choosing to move forward anyway. Not because I'm brave, but because I raised you to become better than me. And that means standing up even when it costs you. Asterisk, my breath hitched. He had known. He had known exactly what kind of danger he was stepping into. Asterisk, if anything happens, don't blame yourself. Don't let them break you. And don't let the truth die with me. You are my greatest pride. Live with honor. Finish what I started. Dad. Asterisk, the final word felt like a weight pressed against my heart. Dad. A title bigger than any rank, one I hadn't heard in too long. I lowered the letter, slowly wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. The Admiral looked away, giving me a moment. He wrote that for me, I whispered. He trusted you, the Admiral said gently. He believed you'd carry on what he couldn't. I swallowed the grief, sharp and raw, but edged with something steadier now, determination. But there's still one thing I don't understand, I said. If he had all this evidence, these notes, this letter, why didn't he bring it straight to you sooner? Or to NCIS? Why meet with that contractor alone? The Admiral let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside him for years. Because he thought he could reason with them, he said. Your father always tried to give people a chance to do the right thing. He believed in the system. He believed in integrity. And he believed if he confronted someone face to face, they'd feel the responsibility of their actions. I shook my head. That was naive. No, the Admiral said firmly. That was who he was. He believed courage meant standing in front of a man and telling him the truth directly. And he did. But the people he confronted weren't men of honor. And that got him killed. The Admiral didn't argue. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice lower. There's something else you need to know. The contractor representative he met that night, the one he confronted, wasn't just a businessman. He had connections. Governmental. Political. He's protected. And he's dangerous. Then we expose him. We will, he said. But to do that, we need more than the notes, more than the letter. I frowned. What else? Your father recorded that meeting. My pulse jumped. Recorded it? How? He nodded. He wore a micro-recorder in his jacket. Something only a handful of people would even recognize. He told me once he'd only use it if he felt truly threatened. I leaned in. Where is it? That, the Admiral said with a heavy exhale, is the problem. It disappeared from the crash site. It was never logged, never mentioned. Cold dread washed over me. Someone took it. Someone who didn't want it found, he said. Which means it still exists. And if we find it, I finished, it proves everything. The Admiral nodded. And destroys everyone involved. I closed the binder. My father's letter still trembled in my hands, warm from my touch. If they killed him to bury the truth, I said quietly, then I'm going to dig until I find every piece they tried to hide. The Admiral met my eyes. Then we moved forward carefully, deliberately. Together. Where do we start? I asked. He pointed at the letter with his last words. I looked down at the shaky inked lines. The final message from the man who raised me, protected me, and ultimately gave his life for me. Finish what I started, my resolve settled like steel. I will, I whispered. I swear it. The days that followed felt like walking through fog, thick, quiet, tense. Yet every step was deliberate. I carried my father's binder everywhere with me, tucked in a plain black laptop sleeve, so it looked like nothing more than routine paperwork. In truth, it was a bomb, a silent, heavy device filled with fuses. Each page another spark waiting to ignite. The Admiral and I didn't meet openly again for a while. Instead, he arranged small windows of time under the guise of routine administrative tasks. 5 minutes in a hallway, a quick stop outside logistics, a folded note left inside a sealed envelope. He was cautious, methodical, and I followed his lead. This kind of corruption doesn't crumble when you shout at it, he said one morning as we crossed paths near the quarterdeck. It crumbles when you build pressure quietly until the people holding it up feel the walls shift beneath them. I understood. Revenge is loud. Justice is patient. And justice would be louder in the end. The first step was recreating my father's trail. Every signature, every witness, every flawed piece of gear. I started by interviewing sailors and chiefs who had logged complaints about equipment failures over the past 3 years. Most didn't think much of it at the time. They chalked it up to old stock, rough handling, or coincidence. But when I showed them the serial numbers in my father's binder, their expressions changed. One chief petty officer rubbed the back of his neck, frowning. I remember that batch. We lost 2 weeks of training because half the comm units were dead on arrival. Another sailor shook his head in disbelief. They told us it was operator error. I knew that wasn't right. And a Marine staff sergeant growled under his breath. I said someone was cutting corners. Nobody wanted to hear it. Piece by piece, the story grew teeth. But documentation wasn't enough. We needed someone inside the contractor's pipeline. Someone who saw the invoices, the aging stock being passed off as new, the rushed shipping logs. That was where the Admiral came through. Meet me behind Supply Building 3 at 1800, he'd written. Wear civilian clothes. The phrasing alone told me how serious this was. At 1800 sharp, the Admiral's black SUV rolled up beside me. He didn't say a word as I got in, just nodded in greeting and drove off base, taking a quiet service road toward the industrial park that bordered the highway. That contractor keeps a satellite office nearby, he said. Low profile, minimal staff, but one person there might be willing to talk. Who? I asked. An accountant, he replied. A good one. She's been trying to leave the company for months. Too honest for their liking. Is she in danger? He exhaled through his nose. Not yet. But if she hands us what I think she will, she could be. We pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript office building. One of those low, beige structures with tinted windows and no signage. The kind of place intentionally designed to be forgettable. Inside, we found her sitting alone in a small conference room. A nervous half-smile pulling at her lips. Mid-40s, tired eyes, hands wrapped around a paper cup she wasn't drinking from. You're the one he said would come, she asked me. I am, I said, sitting across from her. Lieutenant Commander Hale. Her expression softened at my last name. Your father. I read his statements. He was the only one who ever asked questions without trying to intimidate me. It struck me how deeply my father's integrity had reached, even into rooms I'd never imagined. She slid a flash drive across the table. Everything is on there. Ledgers, emails, duplicate invoices, photos of shipments that weren't what the paperwork claimed. And one more thing. Her voice dropped, trembling. A recording. A chill ran through me. A recording of what? She licked her lips. Your father's final meeting. Not the audio. Someone destroyed that. But the office had a hidden security camera. They didn't realize it was backed up off-site. My pulse thundered. You've seen it. She nodded. I watched it twice. Once because I had to. Once because I couldn't believe what I'd seen. The Admiral leaned forward, jaw tight. What's on it? She hesitated, fear creeping over her face. Your father wasn't arguing with the contractor rep. He was calm, direct. But that man, he threatened him. Told him he was risking his daughter's future by pushing this. And then, her voice cracked. And then he followed your father out of the office. The angle changes, but you can see them in the hallway. The rep grabs his arm, says something I couldn't hear. And your father, he just shakes his head and walks away. And after that, I pressed. I don't know, she said. The exterior cameras were wiped, but you can see the rep leaving through the back door just minutes before your father. A lead weight dropped in my stomach. Motive, opportunity, threats, the Admiral murmured. It's enough to force an inquiry. But the accountant wasn't finished. There's more, she whispered. Someone inside your father's chain of command alerted the contractor that he was filing a formal report. Someone on the military side. My blood ran cold. Asterisk someone in uniform. Someone my father trusted. Asterisk who? I demanded. She took a shaky breath and opened a small manila envelope. Inside was a printout of a phone record. 2 calls made the night before my father died. One from the contractor's representative, and the other from a Navy officer. I stared at the name. The blood in my veins turned to glass. A commander. A familiar one. One who had spoken at my father's memorial service, as if he'd lost a brother. The Admiral saw my expression. You know him? Yes, I said, my voice cold. I do. The accountant leaned back, fear etched into her features. I'll testify, she said. But if you're going after these people, you need official backing. Real authority. The Admiral nodded. We're going to the Inspector General with your statement. The evidence and the binder will force their hand. For the first time since my father's death, I felt a shift in my chest. Not grief, not rage, but momentum. The truth was rising, and the people who buried it were about to be exposed. The Admiral placed a steady hand on my shoulder. This won't be easy, he said. They'll deny everything. They'll deflect and stall. But if we do this right, they won't escape accountability. I closed my hand around the flash drive. Then let's do it right, I said. For him. The Admiral looked at me. Really looked. For him, he repeated. The Inspector General's office wasn't a place you walked into casually. The walls were bare, the lights too bright, and the atmosphere so quiet you could hear a pen drop 2 rooms away. When the Admiral and I stepped inside with the binder, the flash drive, and the accountant's sworn statement, I felt the full weight of every step. It wasn't just my boots echoing on the polished tile. It was my father's memory walking beside me. We were escorted to a secure conference room, the kind made for uncomfortable conversations with serious consequences. A team of investigators filed in, 2 civilians, 1 JAG officer, 1 NCIS agent. No small talk, no polite smiles. They were here for the truth. The Admiral presented the evidence first. He spoke like a man who had carried guilt for too long and had finally decided to set it down. When he described the inconsistencies in the crash report, his voice didn't waver. When he revealed the letter my father wrote, he paused only once, long enough to steady himself, before continuing. Then it was my turn. I laid out everything. The defective equipment, the sailors and Marines I'd spoken with, the pattern of manipulation, the threats, the contractor rep following my father out of the building, the phone call from the officer who had betrayed him. My voice stayed steady, but inside I felt something burning, a steady flame I hadn't had in 2 years. When we finished, the room went silent. The NCIS agent finally spoke. Lieutenant Commander, this is substantial, and it's damning. We'll open a full investigation immediately. The JAG officer added, and the officer who leaked to the contractor, he will be subpoenaed. If he cooperated in suppressing a report, he'll face charges. I didn't breathe until those words hit the air. The truth was finally moving forward. The Admiral exhaled a sound so quiet most people would have missed it, but I didn't. It carried 2 years of guilt finally breaking open. The investigators asked us not to discuss details with anyone. We agreed. As we left the building, the Admiral stopped just outside the glass doors, the sun casting a thin beam across the courtyard. "You did well in there," he said. "So did you," I replied. He looked away, hands clasped behind his back in that formal, absent-minded way flag officers do when they're standing in their own thoughts. "Your father would be proud." The words hit me harder than I expected. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. We stood there a moment longer before he reached into his pocket. When he turned back, he was holding something I'd stared at on that conference table days earlier. My father's ring. "I kept this longer than I should have," he said softly. "Not because I wanted it, but because I couldn't face what it meant." I swallowed. "And now it belongs where it always should have been." He extended his hand. I hesitated, not because I didn't want it, but because taking it meant accepting something bigger than proof or evidence. It meant accepting the story behind it, the story he had hidden, the guilt he had carried, the truth my father had died for. Slowly, I held out my palm. The Admiral placed the ring into my hand with the care of someone lowering a flag. The gold felt warm, solid, alive. I curled my fingers around it. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "No," he replied. "Thank your father. He never stopped fighting for what was right, even when the people around him didn't deserve that kind of loyalty." A gust of wind swept across the courtyard, and for a second, the air smelled faintly like engine oil and old leather, my father's scent after long days in the workshop behind our house. I closed my eyes, letting the memory settle deep inside me. When I opened them, the Admiral was studying me with a look I couldn't quite name. "You remind me of him," he said. "Not just in how you look, in how you stand, in how you carry your burdens. The world needs more officers like that." I nodded, unable to speak. The investigation unfolded over the next month. Quietly at first, then with the force of a wave gathering speed. Subpoenas were issued, bank accounts examined, emails seized. The contractor rep was arrested. The officer who betrayed my father confessed under pressure from NCIS, but attempted to frame his involvement as misjudgment. Nobody bought it. Eventually, the Inspector General published a formal report. Fraud, bribery, coercion, suppression of whistleblower complaints, negligence leading to loss of life. My father's name was vindicated. His warnings were validated. His integrity was restored. At the ceremony where the Navy formally acknowledged his sacrifice, I stood in uniform, the trident gleaming under the auditorium lights. The Admiral delivered the speech, not as a four-star, but as a man who once owed his life to the Master Chief he failed to protect. "He was a brother to me," the Admiral said, his voice thick with emotion. "And his courage lives on in the daughter who finished the fight." He looked toward me, his eyes shining. I touched the ring in my pocket. Later that night, I drove to my father's gravesite. The grass was trimmed neatly. A small American flag fluttered against the headstone. I knelt down, tracing the letters of his name with my thumb. "I did it," I whispered. "I finished what you started." A breeze rustled the trees. Call it coincidence, call it faith, call it memory, but it felt like an answer. Not in words, but in the quiet assurance that he was still with me. I slipped the ring onto a thin chain and placed it around my neck. It rested over my heart, heavy, grounding, exactly where it belonged. As I rose to leave, I looked at the sunset reflecting off the marble crosses and granite stones around me. Rows of men and women who served with honor. Rows of stories. Rows of sacrifices. And I thought about the lessons learned, the fights won, and the quiet dignity of those who refused to let the truth die. If you've ever carried a hurt that felt too heavy, or a truth that felt buried too deep, don't give up. Don't let it stay silent. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.